Before we start, please make sure to like, subscribe, and share this video with your friends and family. Also, can you please tell me where and what time you're watching? Thanks. The screaming in the hall echoed and warped as new voices joined in. At times, the subjects screamed so loud and for so long that they tore their vocal cords or began coughing up blood from ruptured capillaries in their throats. I smiled to myself. Personally, I had no grudge against these men and women, though some were from Al-Qaeda, the Islamic State, or Mexican drug cartels. We had murderers, rapists, torturers, gangsters, and terrorists aplenty to experiment on. But who was I to judge? I wasn't much better. I just worked for the other side. I tortured people for the CIA and in service of protecting the USA above all. Jay, a chubby blonde secretary with a moon-shaped face, said from behind me. I turned to see Cheryl. Cheryl, I greeted her with a nod and a pleasant smile. She was the epitome of compartmentalization. At home, she was a typical soccer mom with kids and PTA meetings. Here, she was an efficient bureaucrat for a secret black ops project that regularly tortured people, sometimes even to death. Cheryl managed to separate these worlds seamlessly, never troubled by the switch. Her work had likely saved countless lives, preventing terrorist attacks and kidnappings around the globe. The screaming became deafening, so I grabbed her arm, guiding her to the break room. There, I poured myself some coffee and lit a cigarette. "I've got good news," she said cheerily, flashing me a saccharine smile. "Your new enhanced interrogation method has a 95% success rate." 95%? I exclaimed, elated. "That's better than waterboarding, sensory deprivation, or anything else we've used. Actually, that's exponentially higher." The new interrogation method, a sanitized term for torture, involved a drug called salvia divinorum. We extracted its main psychoactive compound, salvinorin A, and delivered it via IV drip. Normally, salvia was smoked and induced short-lived, intense dysphoric hallucinations, but with an IV, we could prolong the experience, keeping subjects trapped in a nightmarish, hallucinatory state for days or weeks. Their minds would shatter after prolonged exposure. For the toughest cases, we combined it with sensory deprivation or even waterboarding. As a scientist, I'd tried a single syringe of salvinorin A to understand its effects firsthand. It was absolutely harrowing. I hallucinated being dismembered into 5 pieces, watched the room collapse around me, and saw the fake plastic plants in my office come to life, mocking me with exaggerated movements. The experience was unbearably disorienting and lasted just 3 or 4 minutes. I could easily see how even the most hardened killers would crack after days of this hell. Cheryl handed me a folder marked Top Secret, the CIA insignia embossed on its cover. "What's this?" I asked, frowning as I opened it. "You're being reassigned," she replied, raising her hands in a conciliatory gesture. I argued against it. I told them your work here wasn't finished, but they insisted. "There's something more important for you stateside. You have 15 minutes to pack. A helicopter's waiting." "This is ridiculous," I snapped, my heart racing as heat flushed my face. "I'm nowhere near done. I need at least a week to finalize my research." She shook her head. "Orders from the top brass. Sorry, Jay," she said before turning to leave. Fuming, I stormed to my office, packed the critical files into a briefcase, and headed to the helipad. The helicopter was already running, its blades churning the salty Caribbean air into a deafening roar. I climbed in, and we took off immediately. To my left, Cheryl sat with a sly smile, glancing at her phone. I leaned back, feeling the helicopter's vibrations coursing through me as we headed toward Florida. What could they want me to see that was so urgent it required me to leave my current assignment immediately? I wondered. I had already witnessed horrible things. Men snapping their bones while straining against the drowning terror of waterboarding, others clawing out their own eyes after losing their sanity, and prisoners killing each other by ripping throats open with their teeth. Whatever awaited me, I hoped it wouldn't leave me with deeper PTSD than I already endured. I had enough nightmares to last a lifetime and woke up screaming every night for the past week. At times, I dreaded falling asleep, fearing the horrors the dream world would hold for me. Soon, the white sands of Florida's beaches came into view. The Black Ops site, nicknamed the Lighthouse, stood surrounded by 3 layers of razor wire-topped electric fences. Guards and sniper towers dotted the outer perimeter every few hundred feet. No one had ever escaped from here. Inside the fencing stood a single towering structure, a pure white windowless behemoth with no insignias. The building rose upward in a narrowing cylindrical shape, with each floor forming a perfect circle. At the top sat a helipad where our helicopter now approached. Its resemblance to a lighthouse gave it its name, but that wasn't the only reason. It also served as the central hub for psychic research on the eastern seaboard. The prisoners here were chosen for their supposed paranormal or mystical abilities, studied meticulously by CIA scientists and agents. As I disembarked the helicopter, an agent in a black suit and sunglasses greeted me. "Dr. Salem?" he asked, shaking my hand. "Just call me Jay," I replied, flashing a polite but hollow smile. With a firm yet gentle grip on my shoulder, he led me into the top level. "We've been following your work with the Salvinoran agent, codename Rapture," he said in a deadpan tone. As we entered a stairwell, the fluorescent lights flickered overhead. "We've modified the compound, strengthening it synthetically and adding functional groups to improve its brain penetration. We're about to test it on the first subject here, a shaman we abducted from the Amazon after witnessing his abilities to levitate objects, generate light from his hands in total darkness, and perform other psychic feats." He led me down a sterile gray hall to a metal door labeled 1308. He opened it, and I followed him inside. A bronze-skinned man lay strapped naked to a metal gurney, an IV tube connecting his arm to a machine. A bag of solution labeled Salvinoran Ethoxy Alpha C hung from the 4th pole. A doctor in a lab coat stood nearby, smiling as we entered. The agent gave him a nod, and he turned on the machine, letting the solution drip into the man's vein. The shaman's eyes widened in surprise. He raised his head, locking his gaze on me. Fires of hell seemed to burn in his dilated pupils. His face twisted into a vicious snarl, his frown lines deepening into cracks as he stared at me with pure hatred. "You will see how damned you are," he growled in a thick Spanish accent, his gaze never wavering. "And you will see hell unleashed. You are demons in human skin, but the real demons are coming to reclaim their throne." He smiled wickedly, his grin stretching unnaturally wide until it reached from ear to ear. "The slit wrists of the sky will open, and horrors of hell will descend upon you," he added. "Why is he still talking?" I asked the doctor. Subjects usually lose coherence immediately, overwhelmed by the dysphoria. "I've never seen anyone speak under Salvinoran A, let alone this modified version, which you said was far stronger." The doctor shook his head. "This isn't a typical subject, Dr. Salem," he replied. "This man broke the necks of 2 soldiers as we brought him in, without laying a hand on them. Psychically speaking, he's one of the strongest specimens we've ever encountered. We've already given him." The shaman had already been injected with large doses of drugs like LSD and barbiturates, but he metabolized them alarmingly fast, remaining mostly unaffected even at heavy doses. I glanced back at him and immediately realized something was horribly wrong. The white wall behind him was gone, replaced by a fiery red hallway that seemed to stretch endlessly. His gaze shifted away from me, focusing instead on the back of the room, where an enormous metal door, hundreds of feet tall, stood ominously. With a deafening screech of metal, it began to open. "That door hasn't opened in 100,000 years, the shaman said, his voice rising with a strange mix of euphoria and rage. "But I have opened it for you now." Fire and smoke poured out as dozens of charred, blackened hands clawed at the edges, pushing the door open faster. The massive weight of the door held them back for a few seconds, but as more hands joined, it flew open with a thunderous crash that echoed like a gunshot. I turned to flee, but the door behind me was locked. Desperately, I tried twisting the knob and throwing the deadbolt, but it felt as if I was pushing against solid steel. Turning back, I saw the first of the beings emerge from the hellish hallway. They reached the CIA agent and the doctor in seconds. The creatures had blackened, blistering skin, smoke swirling behind them as they moved. They were naked, their burnt flesh glowing with embers. Their eyes glowed red, and their bald heads shimmered like molten rock. Without hesitation, they tore into the agent and doctor with raw, brutal strength. Their hands ripped through flesh, leaving scorched wounds behind. They licked the blood from their hands, moaning in what sounded like pleasure. At that moment, the door to the room burst open, and a team of CIA agents in SWAT gear stormed in, rifles raised. Without hesitation, they opened fire, their bullets tearing into the creatures. I used the distraction to sprint out of the room and down the hallway. Behind me, the screams of both agents and creatures echoed ominously, mixing into a symphony of horror. I ran to the helipad where I found the pilot. Gasping for breath, I told him everything, and we quickly took off, leaving that nightmare behind. To this day, I don't know what happened at the lighthouse after I escaped. As far as I know, the pilot and I were the only survivors. I can only hope the evil was contained within those walls. If it escaped, it could mean the end of the world. I vividly recall the shaman's grin as it stretched unnaturally wide, splitting the skin of his cheeks. Blood trickled down his face as if he'd been cut from ear to ear. Behind the torn skin, rows upon rows of razor-sharp, blood-soaked teeth gleamed like a shark's. His voice turned guttural, gurgling with the blood pooling in his mouth. "They're coming for you. You cannot hide from the eyes of hell," he screamed, his voice echoing in my mind. I woke up screaming in the helicopter, flying far away from the lighthouse, a place where an experiment had gone catastrophically wrong, unleashing horrors from another dimension. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw them. Their blackened, smoldering skin, glowing red eyes, and the way they tore my colleagues apart, drinking their blood like ravenous predators. Looking out the window, I saw the pilot aiming for the nearest Air Force base, just 30 minutes away. As we landed on a helipad surrounded by fighter jets and control towers, my phone buzzed. The screen read, "Private number." I knew what that meant. A call from the CIA or another agency. "Hello?" I answered immediately. "Where the hell are you?" a gruff voice demanded. "You weren't cleared to leave the site." "I had to leave," I shouted back. "I would have died if I stayed." The man on the other end sighed, his frustration clear. "You could have had the pilot land outside the lighthouse's perimeter. Instead, you chose to land at a redacted Air Force base. Do you have any idea what—" As soon as they spotted the chopper on the horizon, I could hear urgency in the agent's voice over the line. "Now get your ass back to the lighthouse entrance ASAP," he barked. "We've got a strike force assembled, and we need someone with inside knowledge of what's going on in there to aid us. Unfortunately for all of us, you're the only one we can still contact. All other grunts and agents within the lighthouse perimeter have gone silent. We expect you back here by 8:30 a.m. I glanced at my watch. It was already 7:45 a.m. I grunted in response and turned to the pilot. "They need us back there immediately," I said. The pilot's eyes widened, his face a mask of disbelief. "Why do they need us back there?" he asked, the shock evident in his tone. "I'm just the pilot." I shrugged. "They specifically requested you," I lied, unwilling to go back alone. He shook his head but started up the chopper anyway. We landed a few hundred feet from the lighthouse's outer perimeter, parking on an open field. I jumped out, and the pilot followed reluctantly, his steps heavy with dread. He had a pistol strapped to his waist and began snapping a few spare magazines into the Velcro pockets on his belt. Ahead, a team of agents and soldiers gathered on the front lawn of the lighthouse, staring up at the building with visible unease. As I approached, a man in an expensive black suit and a head full of stark white hair strode toward me. His skin was pale, but his eyes were so dark they seemed nearly black. "Dr. Salem," he said, sticking out his hand. "I'm Agent Roscoe. We spoke on the phone a few minutes ago." I shook his hand, his grip firm enough to crush my fingers. I tried not to wince. "I think you need to see this," Roscoe said, releasing my hand and turning toward the agents near a Humvee. The pilot and I followed him to the back of the vehicle, where radio equipment had been set up in the open trunk. A slender woman sat by the equipment, adjusting dials. She turned to Roscoe. "Okay, I've got it," she said. Roscoe nodded and gestured to me. "This has been broadcasting on repeat to the surrounding towns," he explained. Leaning in, I listened as a growing sense of dread gnawed at my stomach. "We have opened the gate," a hissing, demonic voice announced. "The final battle has begun. We will be victorious. The forces of hell are unleashed. To those listening, all is not lost for you, but you must prove yourself worthy. To do this, we require a sacrifice. You must choose a family member, whether a son or daughter, a mother or father, a brother or sister, a wife or husband. It matters not to us. Drag the one you have chosen outside the front of your house, slit their throat, dip your hand in their blood, and leave a handprint on your door using their life essence. If you do this, we will pass over you, as the angels passed over the homes of those in ancient Egypt who marked their doors with blood. If you refuse, you will die horribly, burnt alive, choking, gasping, tortured. Choose wisely. The end is near. You will not receive another chance." The voice trailed off, replaced by static, then clicking noises, before the message began to loop again. "This is broadcasting on every AM and FM radio station within a 30-mile radius," Roscoe said grimly. "We've tried signal jamming, but nothing stops it." "What do you make of this?" Roscoe asked me. Behind me, I heard the pilot shuffle nervously. Sir?" the pilot said, his voice trembling. Roscoe's head snapped toward him, his expression sharp. "And just who the hell are you?" "My name is Officer Alice Booth, sir, United States Air Force. My presence was requested," the pilot said quickly. Before Roscoe could question further, I cut in. "He's with me." I lied again, a strange instinct telling me I needed this man nearby. Something deep in my gut insisted I couldn't let him leave my side. I shifted the focus back to the situation. "Look," I said. "Whatever was opened on the 13th floor of the lighthouse is not human. I saw those things with my own eyes. They tore through an entire armed CIA team like it was nothing. As for this broadcast, maybe it's a ploy to brainwash people into some... The reason might have been to use the local population as slaves or something scarce. I don't know. And honestly, I don't think anyone truly does. Not for sure, at least." But then, Sir Alistair pointed behind us, toward the front gate of the lighthouse. "Something is breaking out. I see movement." We all turned, and with a horrified gasp, I realized he was right. Dozens of black demonic figures swarmed the gates, pouring out of the lighthouse as thick clouds of black smoke followed in their wake. But that wasn't all. At the top of the structure, I saw winged demons leaping off the helipad and diving straight at us. They resembled enormous gargoyles with sleek black glistening skin and jaws that unhinged like a snake's. Within moments, the first wave reached the CIA agents at the front. Their grotesque jaws widened monstrously, snapping around the agents' bodies, cutting them clean in half at the waist or chest. The severed legs of the dying agents spasmed on the ground, the nerves firing chaotically as their mutilated torsos collapsed lifelessly. The gargoyles' piercing shrieks echoed, and the agents in front began to respond, raising their rifles. Gunfire erupted all around, a deafening cacophony of automatic weapons. Bullets tore into the gargoyles, shattering their reptilian faces, and black blood sprayed in every direction. Hundreds of soldiers and agents began retreating in a disciplined formation, stepping back while laying down concentrated fire to hold back the nearest monstrosities. But behind them, the black humanoid figures were breaching the outer electric fence. From the guard towers, soldiers aimed down at the burned demons, firing methodically, while a few CIA agents lobbed grenades into the horde. "Get down!" someone screamed. "Take cover!" I ducked behind a nearby Humvee, covering my ears as a series of massive explosions shook the ground. Peering out, I saw that dozens of demons had been obliterated. Their body parts littered the ground, severed limbs and heads scattered across the grass. One decapitated demon head twitched slightly, its fiery red eyes dimming as if snuffed out. But the grenades had also blown open gaps in the perimeter fence, allowing the remaining hordes to surge through the new breaches. Grabbing Agent Roscoe, I shouted, "We need to get to the shaman. He's on the 13th floor. Can you get us into the building? Is there another entrance, like an underground tunnel?" The pilot stood beside me, frozen in shock as the chaos of gunfire and screaming demons surrounded us. The front wave hadn't yet reached the soldiers, but they were closing in fast. "Follow me," Roscoe said, sprinting to a nearby Humvee. Alistair and I climbed into the back and Roscoe floored it, the vehicle speeding along a dirt road that curved around the lighthouse's perimeter. "There's a hidden access tunnel used for maintenance on the far side of the fence," Roscoe explained as he drove. "Few people know it exists and the hatch is completely concealed. You need a special security code to open it, but I have that. We secured all necessary information from the lighthouse's security feeds before deploying." "I have an idea," I said, my voice grim, "but it's risky and I can't guarantee it'll work. The shaman is probably still being pumped full of drugs through an IV. If he's the one holding the doorway open, stopping the drugs might sever his connection. If we get him out of there, we could close the hellmouth." "Hellmouth?" Roscoe repeated, raising an eyebrow. "I like that. It's fitting." "Do you think we'll have to kill him?" Alistair asked, his voice hesitant. I turned to him, realizing I'd almost forgotten he was even there in the adrenaline-fueled chaos. "I don't think so," I said. "But if we have to, don't hesitate. One life to save countless others. It's a necessary evil." Alistair shook his head firmly. "I don't believe in that ends justify the means crap," he said. "I won't kill an innocent man. God wouldn't forgive me for that. When I meet my Creator, I want him to know I never harmed an innocent person in my life." "And how do you know the shaman is innocent?" Agent Roscoe asked Alistair, glancing at him in the rearview mirror. "You've seen the horrors he unleashed. He only unleashed those horrors after you kidnapped and tortured him for no reason other than his supernatural abilities," Alistair replied sharply. "That sounds like the definition of an innocent bystander to me. Whatever unintended consequences arose from your experiment, that's on the CIA, not on the shaman you tortured out of scientific curiosity." Agent Roscoe suddenly slammed on the brakes, pointing to a shrub just left of the car. "The hidden hatchway door is under that withered-looking bush," he said. "Let's get this done." He jumped out of the driver's seat, grabbed an M4 carbine from the passenger side, and sprinted to the shrub. Dropping to his knees, he began feeling around in the dirt. "Aha!" he exclaimed, pulling up a hidden handle. As he twisted it, a robotic voice echoed from unseen speakers in the hatchway door. "Please enter verification code," the voice droned. 091-0777, Agent Roscoe replied flatly. The hatch door began to swing open, taking the shrub with it. The bush, a fake plant attached to the metal surface as a marker, scattered dirt into the tropical Florida breeze as it moved. Peering down, I saw a ladder leading into total darkness, with faint red emergency lights strobing at the bottom of the tunnel. Without hesitation, Agent Roscoe climbed down first, followed by Alistair and me, and the tunnel reeked of bleach and dust, clearly not often used. I noticed spiderwebs in the upper corners, the flickering red light illuminating large arachnids scurrying away from the new intruders in their silent den. We walked for what felt like forever, the perfectly straight tunnel stretching thousands of feet ahead before narrowing into a vanishing point. After about 20 minutes, Agent Roscoe raised his hand, the universal military signal to stop. "Up ahead," he whispered. "That's the entrance to the lighthouse." Looking ahead, I saw another ladder about 200 feet away. "Then let's do this," I said. Roscoe glanced at me incredulously. "Do you even have a gun, Jay?" I sighed, shaking my head. He crouched and pulled a pistol from his ankle holster. "Luckily for you, I always carry 2 pistols, and extra magazines too. Here." He handed me the weapon along with 2 preloaded magazines. "If 3 magazines aren't enough to stop what's attacking us, then nothing will," he added. Why do you need 2 pistols and a full auto M4 carbine? I asked. He smirked slightly. Better safe than sorry. Plus, the M4 burns through ammo too quickly in full auto. In a situation like this, you need backups. Eyeing the latter with a grim expression, he muttered, "Okay, let's do this." Slinging the M4 around his neck with its strap, he climbed rapidly. I followed next, with Alistair close behind. We emerged in a basement filled with boilers, circuit breakers, and other machinery critical to the lighthouse's operation. The room was eerily quiet as we climbed another flight of stairs to the ground level. A low electric hum filled the air, reminiscent of high-voltage power lines overhead. Yet there were no demons or gargoyles in sight. Instead, we saw a single elderly man crossing the lobby, wearing a fishing cap and loose-fitting clothes. "Sir," Agent Roscoe called, raising his M4 and aiming it at the man. The figure turned, and I gasped in horror. His eyes were pure black sockets, his nose consumed by what appeared to be cancerous tumors. Blood and pus dripped down his face, the hideous wounds exposing raw flesh. His mouth lacked teeth or a tongue, instead forming an empty black void, as his lips stretched impossibly wide, far beyond the limits of a human jaw. He let out an ear-piercing scream. The sound carried a violent rush of air toward us, carrying with it a stench that was unbearable. The stench of rotting bodies filled the air, and I felt a sudden urge to vomit. Agent Roscoe began firing, spraying countless bullets into the man's chest. Each shot forced him back slightly, but his wounds healed instantly, the skin growing back as if nothing had happened. Undeterred, the man began advancing toward us. "Run!" Roscoe yelled. "I'll distract him. Get to the 13th floor, both of you." Without hesitation, Alistair and I bolted, sprinting up the stairs in a blind panic. Behind us, I heard the hideous shrieks of the man echo through the halls, followed by an eerie, deathly silence. We kept climbing, our lungs burning and our hearts pounding as we pushed ourselves up all 13 flights of stairs. Finally, we reached the top, panting and heaving from the exertion. Strangely, we encountered no creatures along the way. The silence gnawed at me, making me uneasy. Perhaps all the monsters had already escaped, or perhaps another wave was yet to come. Creeping forward, I approached the room where I knew the shaman was being held. I peered around the doorway and saw him lying on a gurney, naked, his eyes wide and dilated, staring blankly at the ceiling. The IV drip was still connected, pumping more of the drug into his veins. The bag, labeled Salvinorin Ethoxy Alpha C, was already half empty. I stepped closer, Alistair standing behind me, and began undoing the medical tape holding the IV in place. As I carefully pulled the needle from the shaman's arm, his gaze suddenly snapped to me, his hateful eyes drilling into mine. "You," he spat. "Please, sir," I said, trying to keep my voice calm. "We have to stop whatever is happening here. I'm sorry for what they did to you, but I was only doing my job. I had no ill will toward you." The shaman let out a maniacal laugh. "No ill will? You kidnapped me, tortured me, stripped me naked, and pumped me full of drugs, and you dare to say you had no ill will?" He snorted in disgust. "You're all the same. Your stupidity and evil will destroy your world, and you'll never learn until it's too late." I glanced beyond him at the massive metal door, standing open at the end of a shimmering, illusory hallway created by the shaman's powers. "How do we close the door?" Alistair asked bluntly. The shaman laughed again, his voice dripping with contempt. "Only the blood of a righteous man can close the door," he said. "And I doubt there's anyone righteous here, is there, Doctor?" "Salem?" He turned his sharp gaze to me. "Your blood would be so impure and evil, it would only force the door open wider. The forces of hell are gathering, and the next wave will soon break through. If you don't act now, you'll never have another chance." I turned to Alistair, my mind racing. "You said you've never harmed an innocent person," I reminded him. He nodded. "You've never taken bribes, never broken ethical codes, nothing?" "Never," he said firmly. "I don't want my Creator to judge me harshly." Then you're the one who has to close the door, I said. I pulled a pocket knife from my pants and looked back at the shaman. What does he have to do? Just slice your arm and let the blood flow on the threshold of the doorway, the shaman said. And hurry, I can hear them getting closer. Alistair hesitated, panic flickering in his eyes. My wife and daughter live nearby, he stammered. We can't let any more of those things out. Then go, I yelled, shoving him toward the door. Do what you have to do. Alistair sprinted toward the threshold. As he neared the doorway, the ground rumbled like an earthquake. Beyond the shimmering portal, hordes of demons rushed forward, their monstrous forms mere feet from breaking through. Alistair thrust his left arm over the threshold and, without hesitation, slashed it open with the knife. Blood spilled freely, pooling around the doorway. Instantly, the demons let out ear-piercing screams, their wails echoing through the air. An invisible force slammed into Alistair, throwing him backward like a rag doll. He landed sprawled on the ground as the metal door slammed shut with a deafening clang. The shimmering hallway dissolved into nothingness, and in seconds, we were back in the original room. The only ones left were the shaman, Alistair's unconscious body, and me. I pulled out my phone and called for help. Within minutes, a military Lifestar helicopter arrived, whisking Alistair away to a nearby hospital for stitches and further treatment. Once he was gone, I untied the shaman, found some clothes for him, and escorted him outside. Do you think it's over? I asked him, my voice trembling. He turned to me, his eyes still brimming with hatred and disgust. As long as people like you exist, he said coldly, it will never be over.